number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and Stephanie Burke. And we are talking the paranormal. We're talking Mothman tonight with our guest Seth Breedlove, and you can check out his website, smalltownmonsters.com. We're talking about the Mothman case tonight, which is the project they're currently working on, but they have some other great, fantastic documentaries there in the Small Town Monsters series that you can check out on their website and purchase and share with all your friends and discuss and really just delve into this, because there's a whole world of these creatures out there. It goes beyond just what you've seen on, TV. It goes beyond just what we've talked about here on the show. And what's great about Seth and his work is they focus on the community and the impact that it has on the community. So it's not just about these legends, but it's about the way that people deal with the legends as well, which is a touch that's missing from a lot of these other media about these things. And also they just find cool stories that nobody else does too. We will be getting right back into the conversation in just a moment. I just want to let everybody know I've been getting a lot of requests from people asking about when we're going to have some different events. We've been talking about the conventions that are coming up, Salem Con, the Provincetown Paracon. We've been talking about those things. But people have been saying, well, when are we going to go legend tripping again? And we will be. I haven't put your microphone on. There you go.
You didn't.
No. But you're on now.
Good.
And but we have been talking about a few things. The thing is that Jeff's climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, so that's taking all of his focus right now. It's gonna take like a month.
Really? That long?
Yeah, it's gonna, between going there, climbing, recovering, all that stuff.
Wow.
He's gonna be out of things for a while. So we're basically starting to lay the groundwork for some plans for when he's ready to get back into the swing of things after that.
I'm ready for it.
And we will have some announcements forthcoming. We have some ideas, some places that we want to go first time, and some places that we want to go back to. And I can tell you, places are reaching out to us, including one that we had a very successful event at last year that people were asking if we're going to get back into. So it looks like we will be. Looks like we're going to be setting that back up again for this year. So we'll have all that information forthcoming for you. In 2 weeks, we won't be here, because we have an event at Lizzie Borden's, so there'll be no show that night. I think I'm going to try and do a pre-recorded show, and hopefully it works out better than last time. Matt Costa, thank you for trying to fix the disaster that was the last show that I recorded. But we'll try and get it right this time, and when we do, hopefully we'll have a recorded show for you that night. But we'll be checking out Lizzie's, and I don't know if you... Did I tell you, Stephanie, what I got? Did
you?
We were talking about this last week. You weren't here, but... We were talking about
Florida.
Budget ghost hunting and things that you can buy. I actually went out and bought those lazy lights that were out this Christmas for people to put on their house.
Yes, you found them?
I bought one.
That's awesome.
And I got it on clearance at Kmart, which is closing down.
Perfect.
And it's literally just a plug-in laser grid. So
that's awesome.
It'll work out great in places like Lizzie Borden's where there's electricity.
So does it
won't work out so good in other places.
Outlet plug, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious to see if that dies on us, just like the laser grids
Exactly, yeah. I want to see if there's any kind of manipulation for it. And, and at the very least, we know that we can let it go without having to tie a hair elastic around it, put it in a chip clip.
The many things that we do. But I think that would be awesome for the basement in Lizzie Borden's, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the one corner where we always see the shadow.
I get a new toy?
Figure.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, we gotta go buy some more of them before they're
How much were they?
I paid $14 for it.
Not bad.
Buy like 4 of them.
Well, I don't have that kind of money.
We'll send you. Go over there. Oh, they're closed already.
Well, for tonight, but they're still open. So if you go back during the day, or we'll get some. We got 4 floors to cover at Lizzie Borden's.
Yeah, that's why I said buy 4.
So yeah, we'll definitely do something, and at the very least, we can just save them and use them at Christmas time and not have to worry about putting any lights out.
Why not?
Because we're lazy, so we like lazy lights. All right, well, let's get back into the discussion with our guest tonight, Seth Breedlove. And we were talking, Seth, in the last hour a little bit about these Men in Black reports that came, people who were seeing this Mothman creature were getting visitations from these Men in Black. And what are some of the commonalities of the reports that people were reporting when these individuals were coming to their doorstep? Are you with us, Seth? Did I knock you off?
Ruh-roh.
Oh, no.
Sorry, yeah, I'm here.
There he is. Okay. All right. I thought I did something. It wouldn't be the first time, so.
It was entirely me, which is usual. At least I couldn't blame this on like a Mothman curse, unlike all of our other technical problems that we've been blaming on that lately.
You say that now, but I'm looking out the window at a pair of glowing red eyes.
There you go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's just the sign at the restaurant across the street.
Yeah, no, the commonality seems to be just how unusual and unearthly the Men in Black did seem to be. They just the way they behaved and spoke and acted in general, just it didn't seem like they were from Earth. It was like they were they had no idea how to act. They were attempting to behave like they saw other people behave. Almost like an imitation of humanity. A lot of times people attribute Indrid Cold actually to being kind of a Men in Black type, because his behavior seems to line up a little bit with them. But Mary Heyer, who wrote for the Athens Messenger and worked with Keel extensively, had a visit from at least one Man in Black at her office one night. And, he came in and was asking all these weird questions. That does seem to be something you commonly hear, is they asked a lot of bizarre questions of witnesses, of not just Mothman, but Men in Black, of UFOs as well. They would ask a lot of bizarre kind of questions. And one of my favorite stories is about this one particular Men in Black who showed up at these people's house, and I believe they had a sighting of a UFO, and he showed up at their house, and he over the course of this discussion, he somehow convinced them, that he was working for a company that took a census basically from like a will, like he was trying to establish that these people were supposed to receive be the recipients of a will. And they let this guy into their house, and he proceeded to sit at their dinner table and interview them. And over the course of the interview, it almost seemed like he started to, the way I think Keel put it, or in the book, it was almost like he was malfunctioning or something. And they kept offering him water. He kept saying he was warm and very hot. He seemed to be like he was almost like he was melting or something. So eventually they gave him water. And I guess the weird thing about it to me was there was also this description where they said at one point he reached down and lifted I think it was his pant leg. And when he did it, they saw wires running down his leg. Mm. Almost like he was like a cyborg or something. It's just such a bizarre story. And that's not even, for the most part, that's pretty typical of how Men in Black sightings are. They're just bizarre.
Talking with Nick Redfern about it in the past, though, sometimes these beings are, these Men in Black figures could very well be humans and seem like they're humans and could be from some clandestine government organization or, non-governmental organization, depending on who you think they're coming from. But that these particular Men in Black that people were encountering in Point Pleasant didn't seem like they were from the government, or at least not from any earthly government.
Right. And the government thing would make sense in a way because, there's a National Guard armory right down the street from the TNT factory area back in the 60s. I don't know if it's still there. There was actually a naval headquarters downtown. You're at a amazingly well-situated major kind of shipping lane on the Ohio River and the Kanawha River. When you go down there, you can't walk out to the edge of the river without seeing a barge or something go by, transporting goods. And so it would make sense that this place is kind of in an ideal spot for something like that to be going on. But yeah, the Men in Black behavior doesn't seem to be human, and it doesn't, it kind of flies in the face of what you would attribute to some sort of government spy agency. People reported seeing these like vans. It wasn't just typically you think of those like a black car or an unmarked kind of car, but people talked about seeing unmarked vans up in the mountains or the hills, parked in bizarre places. They saw men up on telephone poles. Men in Black up on telephone poles doing God knows what with telephone lines. And then you got to wonder, because one of the things that Keel wrote about was people would hear voices coming from what seemed to be above them in the air, but there's nothing there. But they would hear voices kind of conversing in the sky above them, and you got to wonder like what exactly was going on in the area at that time. Faye DeWitt, who had a sighting of the Mothman, and we talked to her. Her and her brother actually were similar to the Scarberries. They were kind of chased by the Mothman. He stayed perpendicular to their car in the TNT factory area. They drove into the power plant and parked, and the Mothman actually perched up on the factory. Her brother got out of the car and, like a crazy person, according to her, threw lumps of coal at it until it kind of came at them and actually landed on the hood of their car and stared in at them. Well, the next day or 2 days after, they went to go back to the TNT area just to see what was going on, if anything else was happening. And the factory, the abandoned factory, was actually roped off, and they said there were men in black at the factory not letting cars in. So, and that was that was a sighting witness of the Mothman repeating that story.
And with these men in black that the Mothman witnesses reported visiting them, I remember, I think it was in Keel's book, where he's talking about how they looked like they were trying to be a certain ethnicity or a certain nationality, but they just weren't getting it right, and that they would be like adjusting their hair, like their entire head of hair was fake. Like it was just something where it made people very uncomfortable by how it's almost like a child's drawing of a person, that it just didn't exactly fit correctly.
Yeah, I mean, there was also the talk of like how they would be in what looked like military attire, but like some small things would be slightly out of place. They'd have the wrong insignia, or they'd be wearing the wrong shoes or whatever. That's one of the weird aspects of this. I mean, there's no what you would typically just say, well, they're probably government officials or something like that. And in a way, again, it does make sense for it to be government officials to me, especially like I found an article online not too long ago. I need to find this article again because I've referenced it a couple times and I haven't given an exact reference as to where I got this from. But there's an article online I found, and I want to say it was on some Air Force website, like an Air Force kind of magazine, something like that, aviation something. But a former Air Force officer said that the entire Mothman incident was based around a prototype paratrooper suit. And that might have been what Scarberries and Mallets actually saw, was, someone testing that suit out over near the TNT area, possibly from that National Guard armory. There was some involvement there, and that's why they were over in the TNT area. But I found it interesting that article is even floating around, because that almost brings to mind something like Roswell, where the government for decades is trying to cover it up with multiple reasons, for what could have been going on. But I found that not too long ago and thought it was really interesting because I'd never heard that before. But that if you Google like Mothman paratrooper suit, prototype suit, you should be able to find that article.
Well, I mean, and that's, I could kind of understand why there would be a disinformation campaign surrounding that, but also with all of the hysteria that was building up amongst these witnesses, you would think that you'd want to address it at some point and say, hey, listen, it was something we were working on, and we can't give you any more information than that. Stop talking about it. Stop sharing the story with everybody, because you're doing us a disservice about this project that we're trying to work on. So you would think they would want to kind of put the kibosh on that a little bit, instead of letting all this speculation and rumor go on for so many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there were reports. There's at least one report I'm aware of where someone said they saw two men actually on the bridge, and it wasn't a direct Men in Black sighting, I don't believe. I think they said they saw two men in plain clothes climbing around the bridge prior to the collapse. So, the MIB stuff that was going on in Point Pleasant was definitely bizarre, and more people have kind of come out over the years since with, with stories about running into people that in retrospect they think might have been involved in that part of the phenomena.
Now, in talking about the Men in Black, we've mentioned and referenced Indrid Cold. Do you go in detail to that story in the movie?
We're not. Cold will definitely get a mention, and it's a piece of that story for sure for a lot of people. But it was covered extensively in Eyes of the Mothman, which is a really good documentary and something I'm a fan of. And it's been covered in almost every story about Mothman, whereas what I'm trying to do is do something that's a little more focused on Point Pleasant,
right,
and everything that happened in Point Pleasant during that time. And having taken place in Parkersburg, it's a little outside of that area. However, I mean, you honestly cannot tell a Mothman story without having at least some aspect of that, the Indrid Cold stuff mentioned in the film. So for sure it's going to be at least touched upon.
Especially where, he's a figure who's reported well prior to the Mothman sightings. A month before the Mothman sightings, he's in New Jersey. And, he's seen, and unlike these Men in Black who are weird but are trying to not be weird, it seems like Cold had no problem just being weird. In fact, he eventually told people that he was from another planet.
Right. Yeah, that first sighting is something that I just actually became aware of the other day, and I need to do some reading into that just from my own curiosity, because I don't know much about it yet, other than the fact that he was seen in Jersey in like 1966, but in like October, I think.
Mm-hmm. So, it was October 16th, so we're talking like a month before,
right?
The Scarberry Mount site. So I mean, it's right. It's kind of in line with all these things happening. It's just not geographically in the same area.
Right, and the initial Cold run-in with Derenberger is downright creepy. It's probably one of the creepiest stories connected with the Mothman, just because of the fact that he's got this this innocent guy driving down Route 77, which I've been driving down my whole life because I grew up in Ohio, and I grew up in a town that literally sits off of 77, and he was driving down this road, and this strange chimney, how do they explain it? Kerosene, like a kerosene lamp chimney, spaceship descends in front of his car on the expressway and lands in front of him. And this man, who he refers to as the Grinning Man, if I'm not mistaken, the Grinning Man gets out and approaches his car, and he speaks to him, but the Grinning Man's mouth isn't moving, so he's telepathically talking to him. The weirdest thing about that story, the Derenberger stuff, is that we've got this documented interview with Derenberger, the Derenberger tapes, I think it's called, which are actually on display at the Mothman Museum, but you can hear them online. If you go on the National Archives, archive.org, and just look up Derenberger, you can actually find the initial interviews that he did with the Charleston, I think it was Charleston, a Charleston radio station or TV station. And I mean, the guy sounds completely normal, totally sane. And I know eventually he did it seemed like eventually Derenberger either started to go, it's hard to say. He either became a full-on contactee, and he wrote books on it, and eventually ran off, if I'm not mistaken, with another lady who was a contactee, and they became married and all that stuff. But I mean, his life kind of went to crap after the initial sightings happened, and eventually he disappeared for like 40 days and claimed that he went to Lanulo with Derenberger and all that stuff. So I mean, Derenberger became like the poster child in a way for the contactee movement.
But and then how does that story and his sighting coincide with Mothman, except for the fact that it's just kind of in the same area at the same time?
Yeah, that's why I kind of don't need to include it, in my opinion, in a major way. I feel like to me it doesn't really tie in too closely with that initial story.
I mean, there have been some stories though of people who also had interactions with Indrid Cold who said, that they equated him as being, him and Mothman were kind of the same ilk, like that Cold knew about the Mothman sightings.
Well, and his behavior seems so similar to what people are describing as the Men in Black stuff. So, I mean, it's all it's all connected because it's all taking place in the Ohio Valley in that span of time. I mean, because, our next movie is going to be about the Chestnut Ridge, and we're going to delve much more into this type of thing, like a larger case that's kind of spread out over one area. Because one of the reasons is because my interest in the Mothman case is it could be there's a huge epic 4-hour miniseries to be done about the Mothman case, because you could cover everything that went on, not just in Point Pleasant, but the Hocking area. There were sightings in the Hocking area of Ohio, which is a couple hours from Point Pleasant, of a Mothman. So, and during 66 and 67, whatever was going on in that period of time in West Virginia and the Ohio Valley in general, seems like, even though it seemed to be centered around Point Pleasant, it definitely had moved outside of that area. I mean, even the Merle Partridge story, which is always connected to the Mothman, is Merle Partridge lived over an hour away from Point Pleasant. And I don't know if you're aware. I'm sure you're aware of the Merle Partridge story, but that's the guy who had the dog Bandit, and he was watching TV with his wife, and strange patterns and stuff started to appear on the TV, and he went outside. Now, that story has been told a couple different ways. In the initial, when you first heard that story, the way I was always familiar with it was that Partridge went outside and he saw the Mothman's eyes. But later in life, and in the interview I have that's going to be in our movie, Merle said that what he saw was more like a UFO in the sky. And his dog ran off in the direction of where these lights were, behind his shed, and was never seen again. So the Partridge story is a obviously it's going to be touched on in our movie as well. But again, it took place over an hour away from Point Pleasant.
And it was also after, if I remember right, it was after the Scarberry Mallet report had been in the paper.
Partridge, I feel like Partridge was before, but you might be right. I don't have my timeline in front of me now. That's one of the things we're doing, with our film. One of the things I want to do is be able to kind of show a timeline of these events, because it is fascinating to go down the chronologically through everything that happened, to be able to say, well, the Scarberry Mallet sighting's here, and Partridge is right here, and this is here.
And especially trying to figure out who might have been influenced by somebody else's report, and it's hard all these years later to detect how genuine somebody might have been. Yeah,
Partridge was actually the day before the Scarberry Mallet sighting.
Okay, all right. So the other question that I had for you, and you being from that area and being familiar with things that happened in that area, is there any correlation between the Mothman sightings and the Flatwoods monster?
Other than the possibility of military involvement and the strangeness of that case, I don't see any direct connection.
And the glowing red eyes,
And the glowing red eyes, but you could connect that to every Bigfoot case there is too. Right. So I don't see a direct connection, but I wish I can tell you we're going to at least mention the Flatwoods case in our film, because the Flatwoods case is like a dream project for me, and unfortunately it's just not something we can feasibly make because of the fact that there's either no witnesses or very few witnesses left to even talk about it.
Yeah. But there are other Mothmans too around the world. There's Owlman in England, and
Sure.
Other people have seen creatures similar to Mothman.
Definitely. And if you decide to bring in Thunderbirds into the equation, it gets even bigger, because, and I think we'll actually talk a little bit in the film about Thunderbird, the Thunderbird in Native American lore and that kind of thing, because there's a connection there too, where the Native Americans, had a obviously Thunderbird legends where the bird was a harbinger of doom and that kind of thing as well.
And that's what we have in this area in the Bridgewater Triangle. We have the Thunderbird sightings that still go on to this day. We have there was a police officer that reported seeing one. Mm-hmm. And so these things have been in this area, and I think they can all be interconnected.
As recently reported as last year.
Yeah, they're still around, and one of the things that fascinates me about those type of sightings is when people, when people are coming forward and seeing Bigfoot or some of these other creatures, it's one of those things where could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be this? Could it be that? These flying humanoid sightings that people are reporting, they're usually very descriptive, and they're usually very, I know that Joe Nickel will probably try to come up with a way to explain it away as being like some large barn owl or something, but there's a lot less margin for error in some of the reports that you see about Mothman and about some of these giant winged humanoid creatures. Sure.
I don't know. The barn owl thing to me is definitely, you could definitely try to shoehorn that into some of these sightings. But to cover every sighting as like a blanket, well, this was a barn owl, I don't know how you could be, and I know Joe is really familiar with the Mothman case, but I just don't know how you could possibly attribute that to the bulk of the sightings. Because to me, that honestly makes less sense than an undiscovered.
Listen, you and I both know a ghost could walk right up to Joe Nickel and slap him across the face, and he would say, "Well, obviously, I'm a paranoid schizophrenic."
Yeah,
because he just can't admit the possibility that there's something out there. So he's going to find a way to crap on everything.
Sure, yeah. But yeah, you're right though. The descriptions are very very descriptive. Well, that was a great turn of phrase there. But we almost every interview we did where we spoke with people who had an initial sighting, of the creature, are extremely descriptive. I mean, it's almost like they relive that incident when they talk about it, especially like Faye DeWitt, the way she describes the eyes and the wings, and every moment of that encounter seems to be ingrained in her mind. And we spoke to a guy, you'd like this one actually, because this goes full on paranormal. We spoke to a guy who woke up in the middle of the night. This is 1966, keep in mind. Woke up in the middle of the night and said Mothman was standing next to his bed.
Whoa.
Yeah, so, and he's going to be in the movie. I don't think he's ever told his story on camera either. So, but we spoke with him, and that was he's the one that told us that it was the devil. So, and he told us that he, claimed the blood of Jesus or whatever, and it disappeared.
Well, I mean, not to take this down some weird paths, but it's not entirely impossible that if there is a devil, that this couldn't be somehow related to that, because you do have this, tragedy that happens later on, and people seem to feel like the two things are connected. It's quite possible that this was some sort of entity of evil just as much as it could have been a warning.
Sure. I mean, and like I said, he's not the only person that we spoke to who connected this thing to the devil. We've heard Linda Scarberry say it before, and then Marcella Bennett. And this was the first time I've heard Marcella say this, but Marcella, and actually Jeff Walmsley, when I told him this, said he'd never heard her say this. Marcella, in the interview we have, said it was Satan. Said when, that's the only thing she could connect what she had seen to, because of the feeling she had when she saw it. She said there was the fear that gripped her, and the cold chills that ran down her spine and all that stuff. She said the only thing she could attribute that fear to would be the devil.
I mean, it really seems to have other, like I said earlier in the show, other cryptid creatures that people report seeing. Lauren Coleman will say it's entirely possible that these are some sort of being that we just haven't discovered yet, or has been lost to us over time, or something that's an actual flesh and blood creature. But that Mothman and everything tied into the story just makes it the fact that it has to be a supernatural creature. There can't be an earthly explanation, or at least a zoological explanation for what it is that people saw.
I mean, I don't have a stake in the game yet. I originally came at this from very much like a cryptid place. In fact, when we started doing preliminary kind of research on the story, the early discussions I had about the movie with Brandon and Zach, my crew, was that, well, I think we're going to do like the Mothman crypto movie. But the story's so much bigger than that I want to tell. And what I want to, so our story is more about everything that kind of happened over that 13-month span and how crazy things were basically what I want to do is put people in the mindset of what it would have been like being in Point Pleasant in 1966 and 67 leading up to that bridge collapse, and how everything did seem to be following this pattern of escalation. So for, when I know where Coleman stands on it, and I'm definitely, I've talked to you before, I'm not a skeptic. I hate using the word skeptic because I never would refer to myself as a skeptic, but I'm skeptical of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still on the skeptical side when it comes to this story, but I can definitely tell you I have no concrete theories every single time we come up with a thought as to what, we think might have happened, it gets shot down in some way. Even while we were filming down in Point Pleasant last weekend, we were out at the factory, this site of literally at the spot where the Scarberries and Mallets saw the Mothman. And it was about 8 o'clock at night. It was dark. We're out at the exact spot where they saw the Mothman. We're getting some shots. And one of the guys had apparently looked up at the factory in the smokestacks that are still there. The original factory's gone, but the smokestacks in the distance at the still functioning factory across the street, the smokestacks have these red lights on top of them. And when you look at them through the trees with the smoke coming up behind them, it looks like you're seeing two giant red eyes and wings behind it. And what's really creepy is as the smoke kind of makes its way from one to the other, they almost look like they're moving. So we actually shot footage of it and took pictures. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that because, my fear then becomes, well, I don't want to be the guy who's attempting to debunk this because I'm not out to debunk anything. Our objective is just to document stories. But I thought that was an interesting kind of thing that you could be there and say, well, look at that could have been what the Scarberries and the Mallets saw. So sure, that's totally possible. Maybe that is what the Scarberries and Mallets saw. But then what the heck did Faye DeWitt see, and what did the pilots over at the Gallipoli Airport see, and what did Merle Partridge see? And every single time you come up with some sort of alternative theory, it's shot down by 1,000 other ones.
And that's the thing, is just because you can explain away one encounter, it doesn't discount everything else.
Right.
Unless it's a copycat syndrome, but this clearly isn't the case with these reports that have, been coming through this. And then the other thing that people, another common mistake that people make in the Mothman story is they think that when the Silver Bridge collapsed and, 46 people died, and that's the end of the Mothman story. That's why Mothman was here, but it's not. There's been other sightings since then.
Sure. Yeah. We've spoken to, I think I've spoken personally to 2 witnesses since then, maybe 3, who had sightings long after the bridge collapse. I mean, the most recent one that I've spoken to was 2009. And he actually had a sighting in the TNT area while he was down there hunting one night. So, I mean, there's definitely still people that claim to have sightings of the creature. And they're not relegated to just Point Pleasant or even West Virginia. Like you said, there's sightings kind of all over the country of things that seem similar to the Mothman.
Well, we do have open phone lines if anybody has a question for our guest, Seth Breedlove, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also share questions in the chat room on SpookySouthCoast.com and on our YouTube channel and within our app. And you can tweet us as well using the hashtag SpookyLive. But Seth, with chronicling this story, you started off with Minerva, which is a story that not a lot of people knew, and you've been covering some of these other monsters. I mean, is there a responsibility when covering something like Mothman? Do you feel like this is kind of something that you've built up to be able to take on this bigger topic, or is it just kind of the way that things worked out?
It's definitely just the way things worked out. But what I do feel a responsibility to do is to not just tell the same exact story that everyone's already seen 1,000 times,
right,
on multiple documentaries. And obviously it's a weird balance you have to strike when you're doing what we're doing, because you don't want to get so hung up on the fact that, well, I got to bring something new to this, that you're not just telling the story in your own voice. But you do have to give people something that they haven't seen before. So our objective has been from the start to make sure that we are turning over new leaves and not solely rehashing things people have seen 1,000 times, and also that we're doing our part to preserve a part of this story that might have been lost. So we do have witnesses that haven't been in films before. We have aspects of the story that have definitely not been touched upon. And we've got, because of Jeff Walmsley, we've got access to interviews with witnesses who've either passed away or can no longer kind of speak for themselves. So I actually think when it's all said and done, we'll have the largest number of original witnesses actually represented in our film. So that's something that's a big deal for me, since kind of our thing is giving the witnesses a voice for themselves rather than, we don't do a lot of recreations and things like that. So definitely giving a voice to witnesses is a huge part in our films, and it's obviously going to be a huge part in this film. But yeah, every movie we've done has seemed like it's up the ante, on the next. And, but yeah, it's completely different from where we started with Minerva, which was an undiscovered story.
Well, we've talked about this in the past, that the idea is that this series, the Small Town Monsters series, is a way to focus in on these stories and legends. But are you starting to see these individual documentaries as maybe being chapters in an overall larger story, that maybe all of these creatures and these monsters are somehow interconnected?
I haven't thought of it in that way, although in the three that we're doing, so the first trilogy, which was Minerva, Beast of Whitehall, and Boggy Creek Monster, subtitle for those is Bigfoot. What we're doing right now is subtitled High Strangeness. Mm-hmm. So Mothman kicks off the High Strangeness trilogy. We're doing Mothman, then we're doing Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, and then we're doing something in 2018, although we haven't 100% decided what that's going to be, but it's going to be a really, kind of bizarre story. And we've got stories we're already looking into for the next one. And I do see a lot of similarities between these stories. The really bizarre kind of tales in that it's always multiple things, multiple different bizarre phenomena that are taking place simultaneously, rather than, most of the Bigfoot stories we've covered, especially Boggy Creek Monster, are pretty much just ground level kind of monster stories. Mm-hmm. And while in the case of Whitehall and Minerva, there are weirder aspects to them, for the most part, it's just a creature that someone sees, and it's not like it's levitating or throwing, orbs at them or anything like that. But the high strangeness area that we're into is there's a lot of correlations between the stories that we're covering right now, the Mothman and Invasion on Chestnut Ridge.
Well, as our friend Greg Newkirk always says, and his T-shirts proclaim, Bigfoot is a ghost. So that that just ties everything all weirdness together. There's a question from Sam in the chat room. He wants to know if you've ever considered doing a documentary on any monsters from the New England area. Yeah, I have. I actually got to spend some time with Loren Coleman this past year, and so two of his early cases that I'm a fan of are the Dover Demon and the Enfield Horror. So at some point, I'd love to get up that way just to do something about, like the Dover Demon. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it's a story I'd love to cover. I don't know. We worked with Paul Bartholomew a lot during Beast of Whitehall, and he's kind of up in that area. He's not as far up into New England as you guys are, but he always talks about the Bennington Triangle. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah. Is that even considered New England? I don't even know if you would consider that.
Yeah, no, that's Vermont, right? That's part of New England. Sam actually has a story from Salem, Massachusetts he could share with you too as well. They have their own weird creature. But Dover Demon is very interesting because on the 30th anniversary of the sighting, Matt Moniz, my co-host, him and it was John Horgan, right?
Yeah.
They go up there to try and, on the 30th anniversary, they're up there reporting live from the field while we're on the air, and we had Loren on as the guest, and we're talking about it. And didn't the police show up and throw everybody else out, but they let you guys stay?
That was interesting because we started up at the top of the hill where the guys in the Volkswagen saw the thing on the wall, and we started reporting from there and working our way down the point at each sighting, and we noticed that these deer jumped over the wall at the same point, and they were following the river going down, and we kept running into the river at each point, with the sighting. But being the anniversary, 50 million other people decided they wanted to show up too, but the police let us stay because we were part of a radio show and promoting this, and we had police escorts. It was kind of neat.
Usually it doesn't work that way. Usually they throw everybody out. Especially the long-haired, crazy-looking guy who's walking around, with another guy who's, wide-eyed and, getting all excited for this stuff. You guys must look like a couple of nuts out there.
They were very...
Looked like?
Yeah.
Well, John looks like a normal person. He just gets very excitable about things.
Well, I meant him.
So, yeah.
I already offered to sacrifice him tonight, so...
It's not too late. We still got 10 minutes in the show.
We do.
So, but there are certainly plenty of stories up this way, Seth, that you could cover. But obviously, with what you guys have planned already, I mean, you've got your hands full with this stuff. Do you have an idea of when the Point Pleasant documentary will be finished?
Yeah, we're shooting for June 2nd is the planned release date. The only thing that could hinder that would be how that plays out with trying to get the release to time out with like iTunes and Google Play. Because of the length of time I have to wait from the time I submit a movie to when it actually goes up on iTunes and Google Play. I want to make sure this time when the movie comes out that it's available kind of everywhere. So I might have to push it back, but I'm not 100% sure. And June 2nd should work out. That's currently the plan. And then Invasion, which is our 5th movie, should be out by Halloween.
Well, I mean, either way, I mean, it should hopefully be out in time for the next Mothman Festival. The big screen kind of first public debut of the movie will be at the Mothman Festival. We wanted to do something, so we could tie the two in together. And Jeff and Ashley have been so awesome about everything that, for sure. I mean, we were there last year at the festival, and we had an amazing event with nothing but like 3 Bigfoot movies. So, going down there and being able to be a part of it in a way other than just as a vendor is really exciting for us. So the plan is, and we're still working out all the details, but the plan is that will be kind of the big screen debut of the movie. But and we had like we launched a Kickstarter for it on like 2 weeks ago now. Mm-hmm. And that's how we funded the post-production of the Mothman movie, and the Kickstarter is still going on. But we launched the movie on a Thursday night at 7:00, and by 8:51 p.m. the project was 110% funded. So, wow. and a lot of that had to do with Mothman Museum, because they were helping promote the event as it was going on, and there were people who were huge Mothman fans who were backing it, and so that's been really cool too. Well, and people can still make donations, though, right? Even if they want to keep putting in support, so you can do that.
I think we've got like 13 days left in the campaign, and like this is probably my favorite of the campaigns we've run, just because like we have a really cool Mothman T-shirt, and then we have the guys from Creature Replica, which do like they do like an action figure line of creature, like cryptid toys. They actually are doing a Mothman statue soon, and they're doing like a special variant that's going to be a part of the Kickstarter campaign. So there's actually like a Mothman statue in our campaign and everything. So yeah, we're running for 13 days still. Not that I'm keeping track.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Go and check it out on the Kickstarter site. But, I mean, there must be also some degree of, and I think we've talked about this before with Minerva, but there's some degree of trepidation when you're showing this film to the people of the town. I mean, that's going to be your most critical audience out of anybody that sees the film.
It's horrifying. It's you can't underscore how terrifying it is, because, and I guess in a way most people would be like, well, who cares? Like, if they don't like it, what's going to happen? But like, there really is a responsibility on our part not to screw this up, and not to make them look bad and make the town look bad and make the people that are in the movie look bad. So when you show it to them in particular, it's absolutely terrifying. The worst was when we showed, not the worst, but the most nervous I've ever been. We went and showed Minerva Monster to the family, that's in the movie, in the house, the same house where the Minerva Monster actually, walked up to the window and all that. We showed them the movie the first time, sitting in their living room with them,
Wow.
And that was absolutely horrifying. That was more terrifying than watching the movie with like 500 people from the town for me. I don't know why, but yeah, it's always a big part of it. And I think it'll be a little different, I would imagine, with Point Pleasant, just because that story has been covered so many times. I really think most people there couldn't care less that we're doing this. I honestly don't. And one of the reasons I think that is because we've contacted the local paper, because like that's one of the way we help get publicity for our films while we're working on them is I contact local press, and their local paper hasn't even responded to nothing. Like they're probably just like, oh, this yokel's back. Like there's another film crew in town. I mean, one of the guys in our movie told us he's been interviewed 40 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably going all the way back to In Search Of days.
Sure. Yeah.
And what's funny is that newspaper, they'll be like, maybe the first week of September we'll call you when we're getting ready for the festival. But that's what's fascinating to me is that, you can take a look at a story like this and still find a different way to tell the story, still be able to unearth things that people haven't heard before. And if it's anything like the previous films in the series, people are going to just be blown away by what you do.
Yeah, I think they will. And it was very nerve-wracking up until about a week ago because I was keenly aware of all the other filmed entertainment about the Mothman case, and I was aware that if we didn't deliver, something outside the norm, that I could potentially be letting people down. And there's, you're always going to be able to introduce people to a story. There's always going to be people out there who aren't aware of the Mothman, who you're just kind of introducing the story to. But still, like even having said that, there's 1,000 people who want to watch, or 1 million people who want to watch movies about the Mothman, who don't want to just sit down and watch the same thing every time.
Right.
So. I'm extremely excited, not just with the interviews we got and stuff, but the footage. I mean, the footage we've captured over the last couple of weeks. I sent you guys a couple, got a chance to watch them, but like some of the footage, even ungraded, just raw footage, looks fantastic.
And the best part about this movie, no Richard Gere to get in the way of the story.
Yeah, not yet. We're talking to him. We're trying to get him in.
I mean, you kind of have to, right? It's worth trying.
I'm pretty sure he's ignoring us.
But if you get the Indrid Cold interview, that's the stuff. That's what I want to see the raw footage of.
Yeah, well, that's the secret interview that Jeff gave us.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Seth Breedlove, for joining us. Again, everybody can check out the Small Town Monsters website, smalltownmonsters.com, if you want to find out more about this film and the other films in the series and follow along with everything they have working. Absolutely recommend it. It's a lot of fun talking with you. I always love having you on as a guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll definitely do it again when the next one comes out.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
That is Seth Breedlove. And you can follow him individually on Twitter with the best Twitter handle of any of our guests, Seth Breeds Love, at Seth Breeds Love. So that's
funny.
You can't miss it. It's easy to find. So always great talking with him. Always great talking about these monsters and to talk about something that's kind of out of the realm of what we usually discuss here on the show, but yet kind of still has a tie into all that stuff.
Of course.
So there's Point Pleasant ghosts that we didn't really even get into that. Mm-hmm. There's as he mentioned, UFO sightings and Men in Black sightings. So it's fascinating. I mean, it's one of those places where you're like, I would like to go spend a week there sometime just to kind of immerse myself in all that.
You're on your own with the big bird.
You don't even like that stuff?
I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I guess I can't say until I experience it.
But the Indrid Cold stuff freaked you out a little, didn't it? You can admit it.
Maybe.
I mean, to not only be an alien, but to admit to everybody that you are.
Yeah, it's weird. It's definitely strange.
I always thought it would be a great name for a band. I actually recommended it when we started the EVPs. I actually recommended Indrid Cold as our name, but we thought it was too obscure. And then it turns out that I think there's actually a band called that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
There's one called Valiant Thor.
There's bands that are called the two names that I was putting out, Indrid Cold and Spring Heeled Jack, both already band names. So
disappointing, but the EVPs worked.
It did, especially since that's how a lot of people would have liked to have heard our music,
right?
Just as like a silent little whisper that they could barely make out.
That? It wasn't bad.
Well, that does it for you can check us out on YouTube. Just look up the EVPs. That does it for this week's edition of Spooky South Coast. We'll be back next week with a brand new show for you. Remember to follow along with us on social media. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook and download our app. It's free for Android and Apple users, so you can follow along with everything that has to do with the show through the app. It's the easiest way to get everything. We highly recommend that's the way that you do things. And you can always reach out to us anytime during the week on Twitter at SpookySC or by email SpookyCrew@SpookySouthCoast.com. So that does it for this week's show. Until next week, for Matt, for Stephanie, for Chris, I'm Tim. Stay spooktacular.